The Diofield Chronicle is Square Enix's newest JRPG strategy franchise. It uses a unique real-time combat system that allows you to move and direct your units in a fresh new way that the genre has not seen very much before. The story follows four main characters: Andreas, Frederick, Iscarian, and Waltequin, through the trials of trying to bring peace to their war-torn country. I actually really like these types of games and thought it was worth trying out based on the demo that was released a few months before the game actually launched. In this review, we're going to dive into the good, the bad, and the downright cringy of the game. There are going to be a ton of major spoilers in this video, so you've been warned. Let's do this. Alright, so in this review, we're going to go through the pros as well as the cons with the game overall. And at the end, I'm going to give, in my opinion, based on my own personal preferences, a score out of 10. May not be the same for everybody, obviously. It does take a certain person to be interested in these types of games, so let's go ahead and jump into the pros. All right, first pro, the art style. I have just the game cover on the background right now. Art style is amazing. Character design, as well as just the graphics that they've created for this game. I really enjoy a lot of the different looks, like, between every single character. Each character, design-wise, definitely felt like they were unique in their own way. And I think they did that on purpose, because there really aren't any specific characters that are really all that similar. Even characters that had the same role. The next pro is definitely just the amount of customization in this game. If you watch the stream, you'll see that I was able to basically customize almost every single aspect of each individual character. And what I mean by that is, aside from leveling up and actually having their own individual stats, characters have skill trees, individual skill trees, called ability. I think they're ability trees. There was also you had the ability to customize the way that your character played based on what weapon you equipped them. I know most people would end up probably equipping the endgame weapons for everybody. It's kind of a no-brainer to do that. But these weapons also came with multiple skills. So if there was one skill, like let's say the endgame weapon that you wanted to use didn't have a preferred skill or ability that you wanted your character to have, you could just equip a weapon that would have that. Good and bad, it allows you to basically get different abilities early on in the game, with a few notable exceptions, the kind of limit break ones weren't available for a while, but they're able to pretty much give you whatever skill you want, so you don't get skills and abilities by leveling up. In addition to customizing that, you can actually customize your summons. You can go ahead and customize your own party. So the way that it would work, you would be paired up with a unit of your choice, and depending on your choice, you can actually kind of have some pretty cool combinations. The customization in this game was actually fantastic, and I felt like the way that they executed on it was very, very good. All right, and the last major pro, I would definitely say, and probably the best thing about the entire game, we all know game's not without its cons, but the gameplay. I would say, you know what, if you want to play a game that is fun, where you get to kind of plan what you're going to do and kind of control the entire field of battle, this is definitely a good game. I know that it seems like in a lot of fights, you kind of just have to burst down people, and you don't really have a lot of opportunity to branch out from that, but it's really depending on how you play. There's a passive way as well as an aggressive way. I started to kind of play around with both, where I would sort of use ranged units. I would set traps where I would allow the enemies to come to me, and basically they would just be completely annihilated. But then there were times where maybe more aggressive approaches were necessary. if, for instance, you were in a fight where you had multiple parties coming towards you and you had to start taking them out one by one before you were gonna, if they all got to you at once, you're basically gonna be overwhelmed. But yeah, the gameplay was a really fresh take on this series. It felt like between pausing and actually like sending units out, while you were able to pause in real time and go ahead and decide what you're going to do, there are a lot of times where I felt actually rushed despite having pauses, because it's in a game of basically seconds. You could be late by 1 second. If I'm moving all my characters in different directions to avoid a giant AoE, and I have to pause each individual one, there's a good chance that I may not actually have a lot of time to actually get them all out of there. And playing on hard mode, getting hit by some of those AoEs, those are the big red marker abilities. It could actually be the difference between success and defeat. But yes, absolutely fantastic gameplay. If there is going to be a sequel or additional content, even though there are some things I really didn't like about the story, which we'll get into after this, I would probably pick up the sequel just for the gameplay. That's how much fun it was. So with that being said, now we get to get into the cons, and there are a couple, so let's get into it. Cons, a lot of them aren't actually that bad if you consider just the genre as a whole, and I'm speaking about JRPGs, because we do see a few things that seem to pop up in other games that we've played. Annoying as they are they the absolute worst thing ever? No. There were a good deal of cringy moments, and one thing that I don't necessarily think is dialogue related, but again, I harped on this my entire playthrough to the audience while we were streaming this. This thing that JRPGs do where if it's not a voice-acted cutscene and you're just reading the text of what the characters are saying to each other, and they just decide to put in random sound bites all throughout while they're speaking. So it might be that these random sound bites bring up something or say something that has completely nothing to do with what you're actually reading on text. That is one thing that I did find pretty annoying, but that might be the cringiest of them all. So alright, so moving on to the next con, and this is also kind of, again, something that seems to be pretty specific in JRPGs. We've played so many of them, but bland main character syndrome seems to be a thing. And in this game in particular, Andreas, who is the one directly behind me staring at the upside down man, Andreas Ronderson is bland as all fucking hell. There are some redeemable qualities, and there's actually a ton of dialogue with Andreas. Andreas being the main character. When you're speaking to anybody, you're speaking to them through Andreas. So he speaks a lot. You should have plenty of opportunity to kind of have just little trickles of personality come out of him. But it's really not. I mean, he's very serious. Being where he came from, he seems to always have been serious. Dealing with what he's dealing with, he just doesn't really have sort of this open personality. He's definitely got walls up. And one thing that I will say about him, it seems in the game, the most personality you actually saw come out of him was his interactions when he was speaking with another character, Waltequin. That was kind of it, but Waltequin and him were kind of slotted to be sort of these two that you were kind of getting the vibe were going to end up being together, or at least that was his romantic interest, because they did have a lot of similarities. We're going to jump into the next con that I have, and that being how they ended the game. As far as the storytelling went, for the most part in the game, while there was a lot of stuff going on, I understand criticism of hey, you didn't know what was all of a sudden you're fighting bandits, and then there's this nation invading over here, but it's kind of realistic in my opinion if this is literally war and like you're kind of this group that is being tasked with kind of jumping all over and you kind of have to be involved on multiple fronts. So that wasn't necessarily bad, but where I feel like the storytelling tanked was at the end of the game. So the final chapter, the majority of the content that I felt like we actually got a chance to access was side quests, and the story quests involved. Things started to pick up very, very quick, almost so fast that it just didn't really feel like it was necessarily going to, you're going to be able to fit all that content in at once. And the way they ended the game, basically, the main character, Andreas, ends up betraying the now king, Frederick, who's also Levi. We'll get into that in a moment. And ends up, it's understood that he kills him at the end of the game after killing the general that they end up being in a battle with, the one that is right across from Andreas in the graphic behind me. To add to that, you find out that Andreas is this spy operative from the Imperial side. In the last 2 minutes, essentially, of the game, you see a cutscene where it takes him back to his childhood, where the general is responsible for killing his family right in front of him and taking him away when he was still a boy. And then from there, the Imperials trained him in combat and all of these different things, basically like, espionage, to raise him to actually cause chaos over in Diofield. That's where they're going to send him. That's where he obviously meets Fred and Levi. And I guess from there, his mission was to, it's very vague. They don't actually say anything. They don't even say, he was what he was doing, being placed in there. You just know that he's basically there to cause problems. I don't know if he necessarily was supposed to be overthrowing the king. It kind of seemed like that because he did when he is the last 30 seconds. He said that he's going to fulfill his one mission while also fulfilling his goal, which we'll get into that in just a moment. His mission, in my opinion, comes off like he's supposed to kill the king or, again, throw the country into disarray, which killing the king after everything else that happens in the game would definitely accomplish that. But his secondary goal in this very short, 2-minute cutscene, he talks about how much he hates the commander that is across from him, how much he hates him, and how much he wants to kill this guy. And that is a goal, basically, because this guy's responsible for basically ruining his life. And so it's weird that he's still on the Imperial side of things, even after everything he's done in the game, all the relationships he's built, what he's done for the greater good of Diofield. And then he's still fine with going ahead and, doing what he does. So, yeah, he ends up killing 2 birds with 1 stone, essentially, because he's able to kill the general, he's able to kill Frederick, the now king. And at the end of the game, post-credits, you see him walk into what looks like the old base of the Blue Foxes. He walks past armor that looks like it belonged to Frederick, and then Walter Quinn's helmet, which was all that was left of her, because remember, she doesn't make it either, and we'll get into that. But yes, so it's implied that they're both dead. And when Andreas walks in, he's completely clad in the armor of the opposing general. So it comes off like they're planning on making a sequel where maybe he is actually going to be the main villain. That would be fine. It's just, it's a little bit too much of a twist. It feels like it was extremely rushed. In addition to that, other plot holes that happened. One thing that just kind of bothered me, the amount of times that Frederick and Levi are mentioned, it's kind of vague. I understand that Frederick is actually Levi, the soon-to-be king, who's presumed dead. He was the prince when he was killed. Turns out he's Levi, and Frederick, the actual Frederick, was the one that was killed in the beginning of the game, or before the game even begins, really. But the way that he continues to refer to himself as Frederick, but then also Levi, he still uses the name Frederick, and he's still referred to as Frederick, but he's also going by Levi as well. It just seems like after he came out as being, the one true heir, Levi, it's strange that he didn't continue to use that name. I think that would have been better. In addition to that, I understand that they started kind of planting the seeds mid to late game that Frederick might actually not be as good and noble as he really is. And you really see that at the end of the game when he does become king, and he just becomes reckless and extremely selfish and prideful. And it is a pretty big change, and that is one that I don't necessarily feel like is necessarily a plot hole, but again, I feel like they could have fleshed it out. They could have, had a little bit more conversations. It's just he started kind of snapping at Andreas more. He would say, hey, we're gonna throw as many bodies at these guys as possible, lay down your lives. He wasn't acting very kingly, and you can kind of see that Andreas towards the end of the game started to kind of withdraw, was not really interested in being his companion anymore. Another plot hole, we already mentioned it a little bit, the whole Walter story. So I was very upset that Walter died. They did take a weird turn with her. She started off very sweet, but one of the first things that we noticed in the beginning when we first meet her, the fact that she was so giddy and so happy to be around Andreas, despite learning that her family was just basically murdered and massacred. Thought that was kind of weird, but then it explained itself out when it turns out that she's actually this powerful necromancer who loves killing. And she ends up actually completely going nuts, basically showing her true colors after seeing that giant undead dragon. She comes out as being this necromancer, and then from there on, her true colors come through. She kills people, she kills civilians, she is just completely reckless. And when they find out about her, they even reference, they're like, are you responsible for killing your own family? And she didn't say no, so it's kind of implied that she may have actually had more to do with it than you think. So then there's that. When she finds out that Frederick is actually Levi, and she sees it as Andreas trying to put Frederick on the throne to kind of, play his own Game of Thrones, she ends up leaving the party, joining the whatever opposing side there is to the Blue Foxes, and goes against them, turns tons of people into undead, both at the church as well as murders. She murders dukes, she murders the other royalty, Levi's brothers that are also fighting for the throne, and then she actually tries to kill us. And in the final cutscene that she appears in, Andreas actually stabs her in the abdomen, where she then hugs him and says that you're going to see me again, pretty much, confusing him. And I think is also because I really do think they were trying to build it up like he may have feelings for her. So the whole time after that, I'm just expecting her to come back. As an ally, as a foe, I don't know. I'm just thinking maybe she's actually going to be the final boss in this game. That never happened. They put this landmine there, and nothing ever happens with it. You're expecting it to go off the entire time. And one of the last fights, we actually fight some Imperials in this cave, these mines, and the final boss in that cave is a similar, basically the same dragon that she ends up summoning when we fight her. So I'm thinking, okay, so she's in league with the Imperials. No, they never fleshed it out. So I'm assuming maybe they did that again because they're probably looking at, we're going to make a second game. But again, you couldn't give us a teaser, show that she's actually alive or something, even if she's not in the game. So yeah, there's that. We lose her at, I believe, chapter 5. The following chapter, I think it was 6, we lose Iska. the other main character aside from Walter, Andreas, and Frederick. And Iska has problems with the way that Andreas as well as Frederick are doing things, because he's definitely pro-democracy. They want to reestablish the throne as the one power. But the whole Iska thing I thought was really strange, how all throughout the game, Andreas is very callous when he's speaking to the other characters. Like, if you want to leave, that's fine, just don't come back. Like, whatever. But it's so weird when Iska tries to leave, for a very good reason, that he has issue with the way that they're doing things. That Andreas apparently threatens his life and, like, threatens to kill him. And it looks like he's going to in the cutscene, but they end up writing out Iska right there, and he completely, like, permanently leaves the party. And you're thinking maybe at the end he's going to come through, maybe Iska is going to return. Iska's just gone, and he never gets referenced ever again. Kind of a weird way to write out one of the main characters, because I would say he's probably the third biggest character, fourth maybe, in the game. The primary four, they're definitely the main ones. So those are all the plot holes. I thought they were all kind of weird. And I don't know if this was necessarily done on purpose. I don't know if the game, the last chapter, with it being felt so rushed, if that was unintentional. Is this a COVID-related problem where maybe they just ran out of resources? Maybe they were against, like the time the game was supposed to be released. Maybe there is a ton of cut content, but they really wrapped it up. And I don't think, for how well things were pacing, I would even say, like, not just chapter 7 but a lot of chapter 6 too, I don't think it was an appropriate way to end the game. And I feel like even if you had a couple cutscenes to explain things, you don't have to expand. It could be that chapter 7 could be just a quick chapter, I don't think you have to expand on, more battles, just come up with more ways to kind of crank out more content. But I think, you do owe it to people to at least explain what things happen. Because I'm kind of waiting the entire last chapter to see, like, how are they going to wrap this all up? We have a couple things in our head. What's going on? And when you didn't get that, I'm not going to lie, I was fucking pissed. I was so angry, because I actually did really enjoy this game, and I feel like the way that they ended it was weird. And it's not just the ending, but also, again, when you don't tie up those plot holes, people are left kind of like wondering, like, what's going on? All right, so that concludes our pros and our cons. So I had a lot to say, positive, but also had a ton to say that was negative. That being said, I still really enjoyed the game. I would say the majority of my enjoyment was in the beginning, but yeah, I would definitely say the way that the ending was handled, as well as the plot holes, I did lower what would have been my score out of 10. But right now, I'm saying, I would say, for me personally, 7 out of 10. Just most of it, the gameplay carrying the majority of it. The story ended up suffering a lot, because I think it had a lot of potential, but it was just poor execution at the end that really kind of messed it up. And I don't think I was expecting anything too crazy as far as story, but also when you have so many plot holes and a rushed ending and essentially a 2-minute cutscene that is supposed to not just wrap up the entire game, but also explain the motivation and the entire background story to the most mysterious character in the game, the main character, it does affect the game, in my opinion. So I would say 7 out of 10, with the gameplay basically carrying it the majority of that score. But I did enjoy it. I really will say I will recommend this if you are into these types of games. If you're just a JRPG fan, maybe you're not necessarily into, like, sort of the tactical strategy games, I don't know if this is necessarily the best one for you. And if it is, you may want to see if you can get it, like, when it's on a discount or something. Still love it, but I just understand that this type of combat and this gameplay isn't necessarily for everyone. And for a lot of people, that wouldn't necessarily deter them if there are other things like, a well thought out story, or, great execution on the ending. So I know that it's not going to be for everyone. But thanks for watching this review. We are going to eventually get into more of these reviews. We have a couple more that we have planned to do. But thank you as always for watching and supporting the channel. And I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.